Recording. Okay, I have just sent you all an email with all of these slides for today attached. Hopefully it has all come through so that if you want to download it and make notes on these revision slides, you can. There's really not a lot that I'm going to say that isn't in the rest of the weekly stuff that we've been doing, but somebody sent me a request to tape it today, so I said I would. There was no attachment. You're kidding me? Okay, I'm just going to pause the recording for a minute and I shall I'm going to record it anyway, so you can come back and get it later. Alrighty, so this is the revision. At the end of the revision, I've got some slides that are some practice questions, and then we will be done, except for I think we've got one revision sheet for the girls who like to do those. Okay, let us go. So you've got 40 multiple choice questions, and you are given 6 questions for a short answer, and you need to answer 5 of them. They're worth 4 marks each. That's a mark out of 60. It comes down to a mark out of 30 overall. Okay, I stuffed up all the numbers at the beginning of the trimester, so hopefully it all works out in the end. But this is what you've got. You've got 2 hours and 10 minutes to do it. So you need to log on early, at least 15 minutes before the exam starts, which is at 5 o'clock on Monday. I will get onto Zoom on this address around 4:30 on Monday. If anyone's got any questions, you just want to chat or whatever, I'll just be sitting here from 4:30 onwards, and at 5 o'clock on the dot, I will open the exam. So make sure you've got a quiet place to sit to do the exam. Don't have interruptions or anything going on. All right. Has anyone got any questions about the exam, or is everyone fairly confident with what you've got to do? Chris, you're shaking your head. You're not sure?
Yeah, I'm half confident.
Half confident.
But no questions, so.
Okay, all right. It is really quite straightforward. You've got oodles of time to do this. So forensic psych next trimester, you've got to write 8 short answers. You've only got to do 5. I'm not expecting novels. I'm only expecting you to write a few sentences. One of the questions is a little bit longer, but if you don't want to do that one, you don't do it. You can drop 1 out of the 6 and just answer 5. You're at home in your houses. I can't see what you're doing when you're at home in your houses doing this. It's not like I've got cameras above your desk. So you can have paperwork out, do whatever you like. It's supposed to be closed book, but I don't know what you're doing there, so it's up to you. All right, let's go. And everyone knows that it's Monday at 5 p.m. Okay, Monday at 5. All right, let's go. So week 1, we did the introduction to the criminal justice system, and we talked about who the main players are in the system. So first of all, you have the police. We refer to the police as being the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, because they're the ones that have the decision about who goes through and is put through to the court system. Sorry, somebody's just sending me a message. All right. So first of all, we have the police. Once the police arrest someone and they're charged, they go into the court system. The courts are to make decisions on guilt or innocence. If it's a summary offence, as you know, it only goes to the magistrate's court. If it's an indictable offence, it will go much further to District Supreme. It'll have a jury to make the decision. And finally, corrections, and the role of corrections is purely and simply to put into place whatever punishment has been designated by the courts. Okay, now for those of you who saw my post yesterday, because I know Latina liked it, about the Claremont case in WA, the reason that I put that up is because we actually look at the Claremont case when we do profiling in forensic psych. So I've gone from teaching this course starting where they had no idea who committed these crimes to them actually catching Bradley Edwards, and now you guys get it from the perspective of he's been caught and hopefully by the around the time really that we're going to get to it in 1010 is around the time he's going to be sentenced. His sentencing is not till about the 23rd of December. He's been in custody all this time too. I don't think there's too much doubt that he murdered Sarah Spears. They just can't prove it because hers is the only body that they've never found, and so they have no DNA, they have no proof. They have a photo of the back of a head. So that's it. So that's why I put that up there. So if you are interested, please have a look at the Claremont case and be familiar with it. We are going to look at the investigation that went on for that back in the mid-1990s. So that's why I put that up. So the three players in the criminal justice system: police, courts and corrections. We then talked about what the aims and the sentencing and punishment are. So retribution, old as the hills. It is one of the earliest forms of punishment. It is an eye for an eye. The whole idea behind retribution is to have a sentence that is commensurate with the level of seriousness of the crime that was committed. So in other words, if somebody goes and kills a child, then the person whose child they killed under retribution could go and get one of their children and kill them for retribution, okay? Eye for an eye. Restitution is just fines. That's just paying money or replacing goods. It's just making restitution for what you did to fix it. After this course, we won't look at restitution an awful lot, but it's just important that you understand it. Deterrence. We have two different types of deterrence. We have general deterrence and we have specific deterrence. General deterrence is where we're sending a message to the public, to a group of people, that if you commit this same type of crime, this is what's going to happen. So for instance, if we had a student that was expelled for plagiarising, we might say, oh, so-and-so won't be coming back to uni. We've had to unfortunately ask them to leave because they committed plagiarism. That's sending a message to the rest of you to go, whoa, I won't do that because that could happen to me. General deterrence. Specific deterrence is aimed at the individual. So giving them a punishment to deter them from committing further crime. Incapacitation is simply about stopping people from having the ability to commit crime. So if you put someone into prison, you simply stop them from being able to commit further crime. And it doesn't always have to be in prison either. You can incapacitate people in the community by simply with home detention or wearing bracelets or something like that. You're just incapacitating them from being able to do what they did before. And rehabilitation, where the whole idea is to try and fix something that is broken about the person. So try and give them job skills, try and change their mental state, try and move them away from their criminogenic friends or community or whatever, but we're trying to fix something that's broken. Okay, could be really handy for you to keep this in mind. I am going to give you some hints going through about some of the short answer questions. A couple of them I can't because there's too much involved, but if I say wink, that might be something you might need to know about. But this one's just a general, keep this one in mind. Okay, so for every 1,000 crimes that occur, only one person will end up being sent to prison. So just keep in mind this funnel of how many crimes are committed to how many people actually end up in prison. Week 2, we talked about perceptions, facts and fallacies and myths. So we discussed the fact that elderly people are most fearful of being the victims of crime. And this is where we have a paradox. Oh, thanks, Chris. This is where we have a paradox where the people who are most fearful of being the victims of crime are actually not the ones who are the victims of crime. So we talked about the fact that it's young men aged 15 to 24 who should be most fearful of being a victim of crime because they are at the highest risk of being a victim of crime, whereas it's mainly elderly people and women who are frightened of being victims. The role of the media, we discussed about the role of the media because that is where most people get their information regarding crime. Wrong one. Oh, you're kidding me. Can I just start the day again? What did I send you?
The forensic psychology one.
Did I? Given you a head start. Just hang on to that one because you'll need that at the end of next trimester. All right, hang on and we'll have another go. I didn't think they had the same colours. Yeah, it is. There's 1010. It's okay for me to call myself a dickhead. All right, let's go to 1013. Let's go to the right number, the right one, the right week. Revision. Right, try it again. You wait till you see this the last slide. Oh my God, it applies so much to what just happened. Okay, I'll keep going. Media, that's where most people get their information regarding crime. So we had all the newsworthiness values, prominence, timeliness, impact, proximity, novelty, conflict, contemporaneousness, and human interest. Just make sure you not so much have an in-depth knowledge about what every single one of them is, but just make sure you know what is and isn't on the list. Okay, what is a moral panic? Wink. A moral panic, you have a group of people who are defined as being bad or defined as being a threat to society, and it's done by the media. Okay? So when we look at the way Muslim people have been treated, bikies have been treated, the media makes out that collectively every single one of them is bad and a threat to society, and of course we know that that's not true at all. Okay, so moral panic is a wink. The effects model, the three models that we discussed in that week. Again, this could be a good multi-choice question or something like that. True, false. The effects model, about people being directly affected by what they see in the media. Being passive and uncritical, so just taking it all on board and believing every single thing that they see. And they just unquestionably believe that the view of crime presented to them is actually what's happening. The functionalist model, on the other hand, views consumers are viewed as active participants. So we all watch those crime scenes for gratification because we really enjoy watching them, and we can watch them and differentiate between what's real and what's not. And the institutional model is where we subjectively interpret what we see, and then we may compare it with what we've experienced in real life. Okay, so it views media as being an institution of social control. Week 3, defining and measuring crime, the really exciting stuff. I promise you it's much better in forensic. Okay, this was the week that we talked about how we define what a crime is and the role that the media play in this. So remember, we looked at the photo of the girl who shot the lion, and then she goes out there and proudly poses with it and says that she'll be judged by the court of public opinion. The media plays a very large role in presenting those images to us. Social constructionism, about how we create our reality based on our knowledge and the knowledge we gain from the world around us. So we all probably live very different lives, and we all gain our knowledge from what happens in the world around us. Now, we're going to do this very early on, week 1, I think, in 1010, talk about this a bit more and have a really interesting case study. So it'd be a bit more exciting than this one was. Come on. The dark figure of crime, always a good question to ask. We all know that the dark figure of crime is the crime that's not recorded. And it's really important that we acknowledge that there is a dark figure of crime, and that we do not simply have anywhere figures that show us accurately every single crime that happens. And they never will be accurate. The best we can do is try and investigate why people might not report crime. So why victims might not come forward and let us know that they have been the victim of a crime. And some of the reasons might be that they don't consider the incident serious enough. So for instance, if somebody comes along and breaks off the side mirror of your car, I mean, that is willful damage. But if you've got an insurance policy that's got a $600 excess and you're going to have to pay to get it repaired anyway, people might go, well, what's the point? Okay, so they don't consider it serious enough. If the victim knew the offender and they don't want to get the offender into trouble, they might not report it. That's a really common one. They think that there's nothing that the police can do. And sometimes there is nothing that the police can do, and we have to be really realistic about that. But people won't report if that's what they think, and they may fear reprisal. So if the offender is someone that they know, they may feel at risk and in danger if they report it. Administrative data we talked about, so it's collected from many different sources such as police, government corrections, hospital and the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Just have a broad understanding of where we get this information from. Is this reflective of all crime victims and offenders? Well, of course it's not. Okay, no one of these sources is going to give us an accurate total picture of everything that's going on. Have they come through yet, Chris?
Not that I've seen, no.
Okay, hopefully I'll get the right ones and they'll be there shortly. All right, we talked also about victims and offenders. How do we calculate rates? So we look at the rates per 100,000, and this is a really big argument that's going on about COVID rates at the moment. I was talking to someone this morning who said that he had seen a, I don't know if it was per 1,000 or per million rate from America. And he said that even though if you just say 100,000 people a day are catching it, that sounds really awful. But when you do it per population, per 100,000, it's really, really low. So that's why we do it, so we can compare what's going on in America to what's happening in Australia. And there's 300 million less people here than over there, but we can do a direct comparison. And my friend lives in Victoria. He's not a very happy person at the moment. He's hanging out for a coffee. He says you can't even buy a coffee at the moment. So he's getting cranky. I'm glad he's in Geelong and I'm up here. We need to understand that the rates of crime are remaining fairly stable or decreasing slightly. Now, we saw that with assaults, they're going up a little tiny bit, but nowhere back near the rate that they were at about 20 years ago. And we need to also acknowledge that after we come out of this year, which I would like to declare ending in about 3 weeks, and we'll just move straight to 2021, that there are going to be changes in our crime rates. We know that there's been a lot more domestic violence and assaults going on. So that is going to affect our crime rates. But if we just look at them overall, they're remaining fairly stable. We looked at the victims. With the exception of sexual assault, most victims are male and mostly age up to 24, and most of them will know their offender, especially in assaults. And assault for young men remains the highest risk. And while young men make up the most of the victims, they also make up most of the offenders. So mostly male, aged up to about 24. Most will offend only once, and you remember the age crime curve where it goes, I can see my finger like that. Okay, so it goes up in those late teen years and then it goes off again. Would be good to just go back and reacquaint yourselves with that. And the reasons for that is that all teenagers, whether they're male or female, the brain is developing at a really, really fast rate. Sometimes the body doesn't keep up with it. They start to move away from being under the control of mum and dad. They get a lot more freedom. There's a lot of peer pressure. Unfortunately, a lot of immaturity that goes with that. Their brains might grow really fast, but they don't have the ability to have the frontal lobe doesn't develop with good decision making. And alcohol and drugs can become a problem as they get older. In relation to Indigenous offending, always good to understand that the rates of incarceration are much, much higher than for non-Indigenous youth, and it can be up to 14 times higher. They are much more likely to be arrested than receive a caution. Repeat victimisation just briefly understands that once you've been a victim, the risk greatly increases that you will be a victim again. And it can often happen really swiftly, especially if you're talking about things like housebreaking. So people will get their house broken into, they'll have all their stuff nicked, and then 4 to 6 weeks later, it'll happen again because the thieves know that their insurance policies come through, they've got all nice new stuff. And that contributes to hotspots. Week 5, street crime and violence. So there's just a very brief list of some of the crimes that you will find under street crime and violence, and property crime and interpersonal crime. So just understand what the differences between those are. This is really straightforward stuff. The time of day that most street crime occurs is at night time and mostly weekend nights. So that's when you'll find it happening. Routine activity theory, you will, if you are going on to uni, hear about this an awful lot. So it's really good that you understand what routine activity theory is. Motivated offender, suitable victim or target, absence of a capable guardian, which can even be just a friend saying to you, come on, don't be stupid and don't do this. That is when routine activity theory says that a crime will occur. So you can picture 3 circles, one for each of those. Where they overlap in the middle is where the crime occurs. We talked about crime prevention through environmental design. So changing the way we design our buildings and our streets to try and stop people from offending. Problem-oriented policing, where the police focus more on the problem rather than the crime. So let's not just keep charging prostitutes for prostitution. Let's look at why they are becoming prostitutes, focus on that. Let's not just keep putting people in prison, fining them, smacking them around for taking drugs or buying drugs. Let's deal with the root underneath as to why they take drugs. And broken windows theory is the one where if a suburb or a neighbourhood looks unkempt, looks not cared for, looks like nobody wants to live there, then that will attract criminals in. Preventing crime against the person. Most crime, including homicide and assault, occurs within private dwellings. So it doesn't happen out on the street as much as we think. We talked about the 3 different types of prevention. So social crime prevention, addressing the factors that influence an individual. Situational crime prevention, which is looking at the design and the landscape. And developmental prevention, attempting to intervene early in the lives of individuals and families. Funnily enough, I think only one person did that question for the short answer with the sociological theories and looking at developmental interventions. Because it's a really actually great question. But nobody liked it. That's fine. So that's getting to the kids when they're really small, because remember, our life course persistent offenders are the ones who might start not offending, but displaying behavioural issues right back from when they're 4 and 5 years of age, with conduct disorder, oppositional defiance disorder. So, or their children are in families where there's a lot of offending going on. So if we can get to these kids and try and do some interventions in preschool, we might be able to stop some of it from happening. Okay. All of your theories, psych and sociological, are important for you to have knowledge of, because there will be questions on all of them and could be something on short answer as well. So we talked about your biological theories, how it's linked to your genetics, but there is no such thing as a crime gene. But if you live in a crime environment, then you are more likely to grow up to think that that's okay. They did the twin studies where they looked at twins who'd been raised apart and raised together. And I watched that absolutely fascinating doco on Netflix about kids, triplets, boys who were deliberately separated and not allowed to go to an adoptive family together. And one ended up in the media and they found each other. And while it wasn't based on crime, they were part of an experiment to see how alike they were growing up in different environments. And one of them ended up suiciding. Really, really, really interesting, because after they found each other, a whole heap of others found that people found they had twins, and that they had been part of this big experiment without even knowing about it. Could never, ever get away with doing that now. Evolutionary theory, throwing back thousands of years almost to the caveman. where it was survival of the fittest. So if you weren't really aggressive and impulsive, then you maybe didn't quite survive, and those traits have passed down. So some people still maintain those types of instincts to be aggressive and impulsive. And neurobiological development during adolescence, which we talked about, and neurobiological impairment where people have brain injuries. And this is starting to show up a lot now in football players who have had lots and lots of head knocks. They're having total personality changes and things going on as they get into their 50s. We talked about classical conditioning, Pavlov's dog. So an unconditioned stimulus leads to an unconditioned response. Add a neutral stimulus, which was the bell. That then becomes the conditioned stimulus because you ring the bell and get the conditioned response, which is the salivating, okay? So either understand it from the point of view of Pavlov's dog or from the hot shower and jumping back when the toilet flushes that we did in the tute. And just if you have the sequence in your head, you'll understand which each of them are. Well, operant conditioning, so positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. So reinforcement is a reward or doing something to increase the behaviour. Punishment, you want to decrease the behaviour. Positive is giving something and negative is taking away. Okay, if you can remember all of those, if you are given a little case study as a question, it might be easier to figure out which one of them is. So a positive reinforcement. You do really well on the exam and mum and dad give you a credit card with $500 and say, go spend it. Yay! Oh, don't look so happy. It might happen. You never know. But that would be a positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement. You see mum in the shops, the kid's screaming its tits off, so she gives it a chocolate to shut it up. So she has removed the behaviour of the screaming, but she has negatively reinforced that behaviour by giving them the chocolate, because what are they going to do the next time they go to the shop? Positive punishment would be giving that child a smack, because you are giving them something and it's a punishment, it's a smack. And a negative punishment is taking something away that for them is a positive stimulus. So if your kids are playing video games, they won't do what they're told, and you take it away, then that is a negative punishment because you are removing something that they really like. Social learning theory, this is where we looked at Bandura and the Bobo doll, okay? When you do psychological theories of crime and sociological theories of crime as two standalone subjects in second year, you'll do these in heaps and heaps of depth and have the opportunity to actually apply them to a criminal. So you'll have to, unless they've changed the assessment, you'll have to pick a criminal and apply a psychological theory to them to explain their behaviour. And social learning theory is always a really, really popular one, especially with Ivan Milat. Really good one with Ivan Milat. Okay, observe others and model their behaviour. Vicarious learning, where you watch other people and watch what the rewards are that they get, whether it's good or bad, and you will internalise what you saw them get and anticipate that if you do the same behaviour, you'll get the same reward. So you see someone shoplifting, they get the goods, they leave, they've got something and they haven't paid for it. You will internalise that and anticipate that if you shoplift, you'll get the same reward. So it's all about observing others and learning how to respond to behaviour. Week 7, sociological theories of crime. So this is where we talked about Lombroso, Cesare Lombroso, who said that you could tell whether someone was going to be a criminal or not by their features and the shape of their skull. Okay, totally debunked now, but it's in the history. Durkheim, crime serves a function in our society. So if we don't have crime in our society, how are we going to know what is right and wrong? And that's what teaches us what becomes a criminal act. So this is in contrast to Marx, who believed that society was a product of conflict. I'm sure you've all learned all about this with Sheena. I hope you have anyway, those of you who've done 1008, okay? The Chicago School was all about those transition zones from the inner city outwards. So the migrants would arrive in the inner city. It was a high crime area. As they put money together and got a job, they would buy houses and move to the outer suburbs. But in that inner city transition zone, the crime stayed the same. So this became about the area and the zone, not about the people, because they kept changing. Strain theory by Merton is, I call it the white picket fence theory. This is where society emphasises that we all need to have certain goals and we can attain them by legitimate or illegitimate means. So he coined the term anomie, which is the imbalance between the goals and the means of achieving them, and that can lead to strain and deviance. So we could have all these goals in the world and no means of achieving them, but we might think that by becoming a drug dealer and selling drugs to other people, we can achieve our goals of owning a house or whatever it is that you want to do. So there was all those different ways that people, their thought processes went. And social control or social bond theory is about what stops us from committing crime. So we have attachments to our family, our community, university, all the socially approved goals that are out there that will stop us from committing crime, okay? We have a belief in society's rules, and we have involvement in conventional activities such as sports, school, and work. Conflict theory, this is Marx, mainly the lower socioeconomic classes who are arrested, charged, and imprisoned for street crimes. Because the upper classes have more money and power and their crimes can be seen as not as bad, or they don't get as much publicity, or they can pay their way out of it. Okay, so I think the case of Jeffrey Epstein at the moment, apparently there's been some documents released of people who travelled to his island, and they're saying that there's a few people who are very wealthy and influential who would be probably pooing their pants at the moment worrying about it, but they don't seem to get into as much trouble as your ordinary bloke in the street would if they did the same thing. And feminist theory that states that women are structurally disadvantaged in society. So we, as women, apparently don't have the opportunities to do the same things as men do, and therefore we take different pathways to crime than men. It's about gender inequality and discrimination that are said to be institutionalised throughout society, and part of the problem is that we are economically dependent upon men. I would think that this theory in this form is not as pertinent as it once was. A lot of women are not economically dependent upon men anymore, and I would like to think that gender inequality and discrimination is not as bad as it was. So hopefully we are moving past needing this theory to explain it. And labelling theory, giving someone a label. So this is a pretty straightforward one. If you give a young kid a label, tell them that they're hopeless, tell them that they're stupid, tell them they'll never amount to anything, well, that's exactly what they're going to do. And if they've had that label put upon them, or if someone has committed a really minor crime but they get labelled a criminal forever, they're going to have difficulty getting a job, a lack of acceptance by the community, and an acceptance of the label that could lead to them behaving in that way. Okay, so labelling theory is really, really important. And to put a face to labelling theory, a very big thing in the news at the moment with an election coming up is the Public Sex Offenders Register for child sex offenders that the government and the opposition are, I don't know if they're both on side with it or not, but they're saying that they want to push it through. Okay, public sex offender registers in the main do not work. People can end up being labelled as a child sex offender because of something silly they've done when they were a kid with a 15-year-old. So, you know, unless they're going to do it that the people who are on it are on it for the right reasons, then it could end up leading to more offending happening, not less. I'm really dodgy about whether it's going to work or not. Okay, white collar crime and internet crime. So white collar crime, this is a wink. White collar crime is really hard to define. You know, if you had to define white collar crime, you could have a page of writing to define it. If I say to you, what's an assault? You're going to say to me, it's when somebody hits somebody else or touches them in the wrong way, something like that. White collar crime, you can't just say white collar crime is. because it can be environmental, it can be corporate, it could be still the internet, that is still white collar crime. And I think I've been a victim in the last week because I bought some shoes and I don't think they're going to arrive. So I'll be chasing my money back in a few weeks, I suspect. Very easy. Got into trouble about that, but I'll be very happy if they do arrive. Okay. A lot of people don't even know that they've been a victim of white collar crime. People can have their identity stolen and not discover it for a very long time. Very often it involves people in positions of trust and respectability. So, you know, these are the people that wear the suits to work, are highly educated, power dressers, and they're in positions of trust and respectability. So people will go, no, they couldn't have done that. And it just about always occurs in a legitimate occupational context, motivated by an economic goal, not characterised by intentional violence. So it's about money. It's just usually all about money. Different types, as I said, corporate, governmental, environmental, and internet, which there's a huge list of internet crimes. The important elements of it, the trust, it's used to lure victims in, and that trust will be lost when they suffer losses. So if companies deliberately try to rip people off, then, you know, people will lose trust in that company and they won't go there anymore. People will become distrustful, as I just said. We all become very cynical, and cooperation and productive relationships are diminished. Week 9, we moved on to policing. As I said back at the beginning, they are the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, deciding who will go through the gate. Their work is mostly reactive, so dealing with street crime when people phone 000. They deal so much with things like noisy parties, disturbances, alarms going off, traffic incidents. So that is mainly what they're dealing with. And as I said, they have the discretion to decide if the alleged offender is going to enter the criminal justice system or be diverted. Policing as a profession is important. Education in the profession is important, both before and after becoming an officer. I think Greg would tell you that those people who've done at least a diploma before applying for police stand a much better chance of getting in. And it's always encouraged once you're in to do professional development throughout your career. So go on to do your degree, maybe do a master's, do a PhD like Greg's done, because he's going to be doctor detective or detective doctor. Can't figure that one out. There's 2 skills that they have to reattain every year. They have to do their firearms qualification and conflict resolution skills. I was talking to someone yesterday who's a member of a gun club around here that the police used to use for doing their requals, and he said they're not really doing them a lot at the moment, simply because they're so tied up with doing border stuff with COVID that some of this stuff's going by the by. I don't know if that's true or not, but it may be. Defence is going to be pulling back off border patrols on the 30th of September. So the police are going to be stretched even further. Community policing is building partnerships between the community and the police. So we want the police to be able to work with the community to help the community take ownership of where they live and have police who understand their problems and not just be reactive. So be seen out in the community, talking to people, working with people, and making it quite clear to criminal types that they're not welcome there. There's a few things that we've got. We've got neighbourhood watch, police beat, school-based officers, and liaison officers. Liaison officers wear the yellow epaulets on their shoulders, and they are absolutely invaluable because they are the people who know those communities. They will be culturally aligned with those communities and be able to be the middleman, if you like, between the police and the community. Problem-oriented policing, I did talk about this before. So focusing on the crime problems, not just on the crime itself. This is all research and evidence-based, which is really important. Some of the examples of where this works is in prostitution. We talked about alcohol store robberies, drug dealing in specific areas. So we will see a really, really fabulous example of therapeutic jurisprudence with a drug court and doing problem-oriented work in 1010. Criminal courts and the judiciary, really, I think most of you will have done this stuff in 1012. So we work on the adversarial process where we have the prosecution and the defence determining the disputed facts. It's up to the prosecution to prove guilt, not the defence to defend it. So the defence could sit there and say absolutely nothing because they don't have to prove that they didn't commit the crime. The prosecution has to prove that they did. The rule of law and due process are really important here. They are the cornerstone and foundation of our legal system. The jury decides on guilt or innocence, not the judge, unless it is a judge-only trial, such as the one Bradley Edwards just had in Western Australia. And although the judge does the sentencing if the person is convicted and will rule on matters of law. So if the jury has a question to ask about a matter of law, then the judge will be the one to answer them and give them direction. And the judge is the one that's allowed to take aggravating and mitigating circumstances into account. Therapeutic jurisprudence is really important to understand. Jurisprudence means the study of the law, so therapeutic jurisprudence, try and say that really fast 3 times when you're 3 sheets to the wind. I challenge you next time you've had a couple of lemonades to try and say that really fast 3 times. TJ is using the law as a social tool. So instead of just taking people into court, beating them over the head with a bat for committing the crime, we're actually looking at the underlying factors that cause them to commit the crime, and we're going to address those. So the diversions are based on the premise, and it can include formal court diversions, and diversion simply means taking an alternate route. We're nearly there. Problem-oriented courts. This is a wink. This is using the authority of the court to address the underlying problems of individuals. So the drug courts will only ever deal with drug issues. Domestic violence courts, of which there is only one in Queensland, will only deal with domestic violence case. ATSI courts will only deal with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and they will usually have elders in the court to help out. Sex offender courts will only deal with sex offenders and will quite often be closed to the public. And the mental health court only deals with mental health problems. Now, we've got others there. We've got the children's court. We've got the land and environment court. We've got the coroner's court. In America, they have the veterans court, which is really fascinating. We don't have it here. We don't really need it here because we have a lot of other things in place for our veterans, and we just don't have as many as they have in America. Okay, so that's a big wink on problem-oriented courts. When we get to corrections, we're talking about prison population. So our prison population is mostly male, and they're mostly aged 20 to 44 years. Our prison population is aging. People are being put into prison for longer and longer sentences, and some are there until they die. They will never come out. So we do have in Brisbane Correction Central Precinct, they do have an aged care wing, where some of the younger prisoners are actually doing certificates in aged care so that they've got some qualifications for when they come out. It's also caught by technology being a lot better. I think in New South Wales, there was just somebody arrested for a murder that happened 20-something years ago, and that person's now in their 50s. So they will probably go into aged care when they are, because if they get a life sentence, they have to serve at least 25 to 30 years. They will be old. Okay. Indigenous prisoners, the Aboriginal population in Australia is about 2.5% of our population. A few years ago, they were 25%. That's now risen up to 32% of prisoners. The reasons are colonisation, dispossession and disadvantage, a decline in their cultural heritage, which is really sad, social isolation and dependence on social support. They are much more likely to be arrested than cautioned, and as I said before, their rates of imprisonment are much, much higher. How effective is prison? So just reiterating the principles of punishment there. 67% of prisoners will reoffend within 3 years. So do we consider that 33% not reoffending is a large enough number to say that it's been successful? That's something for you to judge as you go through your studies. We got to victimology, where we talked about the study of victims. So for many, many decades, victims were not considered at all. We just didn't care about the victims at all. Do they have a role to play now? Does their gender and age vary? Well, yes, it does, but victims are still likely to be young men. What are their needs? Well, their needs are that they want to be listened to, they want to be heard, and they want to be taken into account when sentencing happens. There are lots of really, really severe impacts upon victims, financially, psychologically, and physically. So financially, if they're the breadwinner in the family, they can't work anymore. Psychologically, if they're reliving the crime over and over, they can't sleep. And physically, well, we've got a lot of knife attacks happening at the moment. 3 people charged with murder over one that happened the night before last on the Gold Coast. A young man from Beenleigh who didn't know them, just wrong place, wrong time. They stabbed him down on Cavill Mall and he's died. 3 of them charged with murder, and a couple of those are under 20. So, que sera, sera to your life. There it goes. What were you thinking? Obviously not thinking at all. But people who are stabbed invariably end up with scars. So how can victimisation be prevented? Okay, this is a wink page. So you need to know about the 3 different types of victims. We have the primary victim, or victims who are the people or the person who suffers directly the effect of the crime. They're the ones who were in the firing line and the one that was there. The secondary victim could be the people around them, like their family, their spouses, partners, children, okay, who might be financially or emotionally dependent upon them. The tertiary victim or victims is the rest of us who bear the cost of the crime or have their lifestyle impacted by being frightened of being a victim of crime. The effects of being a victim of crime can be immediate, short-term or long-term. May drag on for quite some time if a court process is involved, because don't forget, the court process in Australia is agonisingly slow. So you could be a victim and be waiting 12 months for it to get to court, and that's going to play with your head the whole time. And that can lead to depression or PTSD, which can involve cognitive, emotional, physical and economic issues for the victim. Okay? All right, that's the content. In a spin, we've just been back through 11 weeks of content. I wasn't ever going to do it in a lot of depth, and I have got a practice exam for us to do now, and we'll see how good you are. It will give you an indication of what you need to focus on. So good luck, everyone. Thank you for being in my class. I think I'll see just about all of you next trimester in 1010. That's if they give me a job. They haven't told me yet, but I'm assuming that I will be doing it. Now, this next slide is just quite prophetic with what happened at the beginning. My track record with technology is woeful. I have people checking and double checking that the exam will load. I've checked it half a dozen times, but I did have a couple of hiccups last trimester because somebody else loaded it up and we hadn't done online exams before. So please say a prayer that at 5 o'clock on Monday, everything is going to go really, really well. And all I have to do is press the button and say go, and you can all get in. It's there and it's all looking good. We'll just see how we go. Okay, has anyone got any questions?
Can we download this practice exam?
I've emailed it to you. Oh, the practice exam. The practice exam is available on Learning Experiences. I've emailed the slides I just went through to you. And I've taped it.
Will we be getting this recording today?
Yeah, I'll upload it when we're finished.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Are you able to send us this as a PowerPoint, the practice exam one?
I can do that too, but I won't do it now. I'll do it after. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through this and let you answer them, and then I'm just going to go through and tell you the answers. But I'm not putting the answers up because the idea is that people are supposed to come to class. So, and if they want to, they can listen to the recording anyway. It'll be on there. Okay. So yes, I will email you this. The practice exam is on Learning Experiences on the site, so you can see it there anyway. All right, you ready? Everybody ready? Where's my next page of people? All righty, let's go. So the first section is, whoop. Okay, there's where to find it too. So if you go to the course site, go down to the bottom under assessment summary, which is a little button down the bottom. Let me just get into it and see if I can share it with you. Where am I? There. Can you see the course site? Yeah, okay. So there it is there, assessment summary. All right. At the moment, you can see PowerPoint career presentation, and that's all you should be able to see. Underneath it says, for me, final exam, but you can't see that yet. Okay. Please tell me you can't see that. Olivia, can you see it? Thank you. I know you won't, Fib. Okay. So that's where you go on Monday. And when I started at 5 o'clock, you'll be able to go in and start answering the questions. There's 5 multiple choice to a page, and when you get the answer, you just click on the dot next to the answer that you want, and it records it in a little scoring box over on the right hand side. You'll see all of that. It starts at 5 and it will automatically shut itself down at 7:10. Now you're supposed to have, under normal circumstances, you would have 10 minutes perusal. You won't need 10 minutes perusal. You could just get in and get going. I'd be very surprised if any of you are still logged on at 7:10. Okay. Like I said, I'll be on a Zoom from about 4:30, on this Zoom at about 4:30 on Monday for any last minute questions, or if you just want to say hello and chat about the weather or anything just to calm yourselves down, but it's nothing to be stressed about, but people do. And then off you go and do the exam, and I'll stay hanging around just in case for about half an hour or so. So if anything happens, you can ask me questions. Okay, is everyone cool with that? Pretty straightforward.
Are you able to, like in the exam, are you able to go back and like go back through questions?
Yeah, you can. So 5 multiple choice or true false per page. So you've got 8 pages of that. Then you've got the short answer, and there's just a box for you to write into or type into. And down the bottom, it'll have previous and next. So you can go back and forth if you want to. Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Is there a character limit for the short answer questions or no?
I don't think so, but I don't want you to write a novel either. Okay? 4 to 6 sentences should be more than adequate to answer most of the questions. Okay? Anybody else?
What do we do when we're finished? Do we just log off or?
Yeah, there's a button there that says submit. So you just have to hit the submit button and you're finished. Either that, or at 7:10, if you are still logged on, it will just kick you out and upload your answers.
Okay, cool.
Okay? It is really straightforward once you get in there. Okay? I really can't open one and show you because the questions would be there. But it is really straightforward once you're in there. You've got that 10 minutes extra time for perusal, so take that time maybe to just have a look around the site, just see how you have to answer the questions, just read it all, take a couple of minutes. You're not going to need 2 hours to do this exam, okay? Especially if you study. If you study, you'll be able to answer some of the multi-choice true false straight off the top of your head, so try and do some study. Alrighty, here we go. So there's one section of true false, and then there's a section of multi-choice, including one trick question. Ready, go. If I go too fast, just yell and I'll go back. Alrighty. Let us go back to the beginning. Okay, I'm just going to go through the answers. It's a bit difficult out of the classroom to ask you to answer them. All right. All prisoners are sentenced. The answer to that is false. We have a lot of prisoners who are on remand waiting to have their day in court, and they have not been sentenced. It is a myth that most crimes are violent in nature is true. It is a myth. Most crimes are not violent in nature. The majority of crime victims are satisfied with the assistance and information that prosecutors give them is false. They're usually happy with the police. They're not so happy with prosecutors and the courts. Conflict theories of crime focus on the interaction between individual characteristics and immediate situational conditions is false. Conflict theories are focusing on the dynamics between the upper classes and the lower classes. People are more likely to be murdered by strangers is also false. They're more likely to be murdered by people that they know. Administrative data includes interviews with prisoners. That is, again, false. Interviews with prisoners are interviews with prisoners. Administrative data is hospitals, ABS, police, those sorts of things. The effects, i.e. the costs of white-collar crimes, are minor compared to street crimes. The answer to that is false. The costs of white-collar crime absolutely outstrips street crime. Females are at greatest risk of homicide victimisation from a romantic partner. Finally, we have a true. Yes, they are. Street crime can have a large effect on the community and the individuals who live there. That is also true. Can lead to people moving, people not shopping in their local shops, businesses closing, all those sorts of things. Males make up the majority of sexual assault victims is obviously false. Most offenders who begin offending in adolescence continue offending well into adulthood is also false. Those who are going to be life course persistent and continue through adulthood start as much younger than adolescents. Women and the elderly are most likely to become victims of crime. That is false. It is young men who are most likely to be victims. The media is the primary source of direct knowledge of the crime problem is also false. Direct knowledge comes from being a victim of crime yourself. Watching the media is indirect knowledge. So it's just about understanding the wording of the questions. Newsworthiness is linked to prominence as a news value. The answer to that is true. And there is more agreement on defining crimes against person or property than crimes against morality is also true. Okay? So hopefully you can ask questions at the end. We'll just get through these. Which of these is not a news value? The answer is C, distal. Distal refers to stuff that happens a fair way away from you in the distance is how I think about it. So you're doing those 3 degrees of separation, as it were. Which of the following terms refers to repetition of behaviour? That is C, recidivism. A driver's licence is suspended for driving under the influence of alcohol. This is an example of E, operant conditioning, negative punishment. So you're taking away something that is value to them for a punishment. Paris and Helen, the answer to this is C, structural strain theory. Research shows that A, males are more likely to murder friends and acquaintances and females are more likely to murder intimates. So watch out, guys. Fear is crime higher among which group? That would be E, the elderly. This sociological concept refers to when social norms no longer control the activities of group members. The answer there is B, anomie, simply because none of the rest of them are sociological concepts. In a typical shift, which of the following tasks is a police officer most likely to perform? That is C, responding to a call about a noise disturbance. Recent studies suggest overall crime rates have D, generally declined. Okay, this is the trick question. Jury finds a man guilty of murder. However, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court still has doubts that the right man has been convicted. He would, E, do nothing. You're not going to get a question like this. This is just a question that I found that somebody had put in here before I took the course. The reason that we need to have, I put that in there is to get you thinking, because the first question gives you the answer. The jury has found him guilty of murder. Once the jury finds someone guilty of murder, the Chief Justice can have as many doubts as he likes, but unless the defence does an appeal, then he or she can do nothing. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Which of the following data sources will not help to capture the dark figure of crime? The answer is A, police data, because police data about arrest rates is the crime. It's not the dark figure. Offending peaks in adolescence, early adulthood, and tends to decline. This is known as C, the age crime curve, not the criminal justice funnel. Family and domestic violence courts aim to D, all of the above. So increase the prosecution, provide victim support, and enhance community awareness. The pairing of stimuli to elicit a conditioned response is derived from which theory? That would be A, classical conditioning. So that's Pavlov's dog. And last but not least, it is broken windows theory, suggests that minor forms of disorder can spiral into more serious offending if left unaddressed. Okay, I won't ask you how you went. I'll leave that for you to add them all up. Okay, that's all I've got for you for today. It was only ever a quick spin through the weeks that we've done and a quick practice exam, which I normally do on paper, but obviously can't, so it's on the slides. I'll hang around for anyone who wants to do the week 11 revision questions or to answer any questions. Otherwise, we can chat at 4:30 on Monday, or I'll see you at the exam at 5. If anything happens on the weekend or on Monday and you can't do the exam, such as you catch COVID, you need a medical certificate, and that needs to be forwarded to the uni with the appropriate paperwork that you can get on the portal so that you can sit the supplemental exam in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. But unless you're dying, I'd say just do it. It's not hard. You'll be fine. And there's nothing worse than putting it off and trying to study for an exam once we've already started the next trimester's work. Okay, is everybody cool? Yep. Everyone's cool on that page. Can't see most of the people. Tahu's giving me a thumbs up. Not seeing Kate's beautiful face today. Diana's not showing her face. Everybody's hiding, and we haven't found Max. Max has gotten lost. All right. I'll see you all on Monday afternoon, unless you're wanting to stay on now. Oh, Kate's being sneaky. Good on you, Kate. Bye. You can go. Who's staying? You're all staying to do the revision sheet for week 11.
Thanks, Wendy. See you later.
See ya. You don't have to stay, but you can if you want. I got to find it. Go away. Right. Oh, Sophie, she's gone. Okay, hang on. Let me just